Hello all! Today's video is a quick and hastily assembled one which I am writing the script for literally the day before it's due to go live. I've got my journalist hat on today. I got it from the fancy dress shop. It's got one of those little cards that says press tucked into the band. It's so cool. Anyway, I received an interesting press release yesterday from the Department for Transport regarding Great British Railways and the Railways Bill. The bill is here. It is basically formalising what GBR is and what it's going to do, making it all official. And the press release is basically translating all that from bureaucrat to English. So I thought I'd make a swift video going through the bits of the press release that leapt out at me with my thoughts. I'll try not to burden you too much with my absurd waffling, but I think that as a train nerd who deals in history, I do have some relevant thoughts. Let's stop further ado-ing and get into it. The main thrust of it is that the rail network is too complicated and renationalising will simplify it. There are several train companies dealing with different regions and different types of traffic, and none of them are responsible for the actual track. This results in a ridiculous amount of red tape, even more than you'd think. They give a specific example of a light in a station that's not working. The train operating company, which runs the station, is in charge of replacing bulbs, so they'd send out for their contractor. But Network Rail is in charge of repairing light fittings. So if the problem is not the bulb, but the fitting, then you've had to get two contractors involved. You can see how this is more complicated than it needs to be. You need to get several people involved in what should be a simple affair. The privatised system also allows for too much buck passing and basically doesn't reward being proactive. Before privatisation, everything was the responsibility of the railway company or the national organisation. So let's take, as they do, the example of leaves on the line. In steam days, locomotives were fitted with sanding gear to enable the engine to get a grip on slippery rails. That's not a thing these days. Network Rail is responsible for clearing the track. They're the ones who get in trouble if there are delays caused by leaves, so there's no motivation for the TOCs to operate trains fitted with sanding equipment. So in other words, preventable delays are not being prevented because the means of prevention cuts into profits. An example given of something that's already been done along these lines is that a number of southeastern trains have been fitted with video and thermal imaging cameras, which enable them to spot potential problems with the track. Under the privatised system, the TOCs are only contracted for a set period of time. This means that there's little motivation to make long-term investments because, again, there's no profit to be had. Why make changes now if you don't even know if you're going to be in charge by the time they take effect? And this affects everything from renewal of rolling stock to staffing strategies. It's hoped that bringing everything under one banner will enable it all to be streamlined. Obviously that hasn't happened yet. We're still kind of in the middle of everything being renationalised. Rail franchises are being folded into GBR as their TOC's terms expire. Some are part of GBR, some are still privately operated. Now, I would like to talk about the issue of fares, as I'm sure we all would. Another point that's highlighted is how complicated the fare system is. I certainly won't dispute that. Only yesterday I had a friend asking how super off-peak fares worked with regards to his particular journey, because it was not at all clear. I've talked before about how a lack of clarity can mean paying more for your journey than you're entitled to, so a simplified fare structure could potentially lead to cheaper fares on an individual basis. However, what I think is the real issue is the overall cost of fares. I mean, even if you're getting the cheapest fare you possibly can, it can still be a lot. I don't know how much potential there is, if any, to freeze or lower the fares. If there's anyone watching this who's involved with GBR who's in a position to tell me, please do feel free to reach out. Happy to keep things anonymous, but I do think it's the big question that everyone's going to want the answer to. In general, the point being made is that GBR should, assuming all goes to plan, allow for a more efficient and logical rail network. Something new is a strengthened passenger watchdog, which will have the ability to carry out research and advocacy on behalf of passengers and hold GBR accountable. Interestingly, though, it's also going to operate across other forms of public transport, so it's not just a railways thing. I would be interested to know how much power this watchdog will actually have to enforce its findings. One thing I find particularly interesting is the concept of devolution. Although the railways will ultimately be under national control, there will be more authority given to the regions to run things per their local needs, and I do think this is a really important step. As I've said before, I get a lot of people complaining that London seems to get rail projects far quicker than the rest of the country. Well, a big reason for that is that the Mayor's office, via Transport for London, has a greater degree of control over railways than other cities do. This means that it's far easier to respond to the city's needs. If other cities could do the same, it makes improvements easier, and as I've said before, transport is a vital factor in driving the local economy. Devolution would also give more control over things like timetables and local fares, so maybe that is the answer to my question over fares, partially at least. Look, it's 10 in the evening, I've been working since 9 in the morning, I can't make sense of anything much right now. Freight. Now, there's a bit here about GBR promoting freight as a legal duty and providing a single point of contact. Now, simple version, this does potentially get more freight on the rails. Even if you're one of those people who uses the phrase war on the motorist unironically, every container wagon represents at least one lorry off the road. But I think freight is kind of the Achilles heel of the GBR thing. I think if you're going to nationalise passenger trains, you should be nationalising freight as well. Freight is profitable. Not enormously profitable, it's true, but it's still money that could be going back into the rail network. Still being in private hands, it's still going to have the kinds of complications that hold passenger services back. If the plan to double the amount of freight on our rails by 2050 is to go ahead as planned, it seems very likely that there will be friction between nationalised rail and private rail freight. Again, I'd be interested to know the official line on all this. The press release ends with a summary of what's been done so far. I've covered some of this before. I did a video on the Arterio trains coming into service on South Western Railway and the fare simplification on East Midlands Rail and Northern Rail a while back. But one thing I'll throw my hands up and admit I didn't know was that Northern are planning a massive investment in new rolling stock of up to 450 new trains, which I'm sure will be very welcome. So anyway, that's my rambling summary of what Great British Railways means based on what I've been supplied. Obviously it's the government line, so to speak, so it is going to emphasise the positives, but I've tried to give a balanced and unbiased view nonetheless. There's stuff I like, there's stuff I don't like so much. In general, I would say my opinion remains unchanged. I do like the idea of using regular trains to assist with infrastructure, which was something I wasn't aware was on the cards before, and as I've said in recent videos, anything that improves railways outside of London is good for the country as a whole. I think things could go further in some areas. I don't pretend to be an expert in modern rail operations, or indeed anything other than eating sandwiches and drinking bad coffee, but I do take a lot of trains. One last thing, I note that GBR's headquarters are in Derby. Midland Railway chads stay winning, I guess. Well, I do hope you enjoyed today's video. If you liked it, please leave a like, and if you'd like more, then consider subscribing. There's more than 1,000 videos on this channel to keep you busy. Today's source was, well, the email from the DFT, so thanks to them for sending that. And of course, a big thank you to my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your generous support. You are the infrared camera to my electric multiple unit. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.